Hello YouTube frogs! Do you guys remember Bronya, one of the most coveted units at the release of honkaistarrail, with an incredibly powerful buff ultimate and a turn skipping skill, but at the cost of all your skill points? Well, what happens when you take Bronya's ultimate, shove it into a skill, and then create a new ultimate that basically cheats the skill point system? That's right, welcome to my complete guide on Sparkle, going over all the details you need to get one of the strongest supports up and running for any team. In this video, we'll cover all her traces and what she does, Eidolons and any effects on her gameplay, optimal choices for light cones and relics, recommended stat ranges for a full build, and team synergies that she enables. Let's begin. So, Sparkle's gameplay design is an incredible mix between raw buffing power and quality of life increase. She not only grants enhanced stat boosts to attack, damage percent, and crit damage, but also increases your skill points so that you have a much easier time spamming abilities. Usually, characters who have strong buffing potential come at the cost of being skill point expensive or require specific setups to provide max value. Sparkle breaks this barrier by not only increasing the skill point cap when she's on the field, but also recovers a significant amount through her abilities. With this perk, Sparkle allows the unique synergy of enabling and keeping up with hyper carries that consume greater than the average skill point per turn. So here's how she works. When you enter battle, Sparkle's talent immediately goes into effect. Instead of usually starting battle with 3 out of 5 skill points, she makes it 3 out of 7, increasing the max cap by 2. Additionally, whenever any skill point is consumed, each team member gains a stacking damage bonus buff for 2 turns up to 3 times. This buff in your stat window is bluntly called damage boost. At level 6, this buff is 4.5% per stack, up to 13.5% damage boost at 3 stacks. It lasts for 2 turns for each character on your team. Whenever anyone uses a skill point, the duration for everyone refreshes. With her Ascension 6 Trace node, her being on the field also grants the whole team 15% attack. And if there are Quantum allies on the team including herself, those Quantum allies will receive 5, 15, 30% increased attack percent. This is shown on the buff page as Nocturne, with increased attack percent values for the Quantum allies already taken into account. If you activate her technique beforehand, she grants the whole team Xlice's stealth buff, allowing you to avoid enemy attacks, and entering battle while stealth, which does not have to be Sparkle herself. She recovers 3 skill points at the beginning of battle, starting at 6 out of 7. Moving on to the actual gameplay, activating her skill allows you to target an ally and grant them a very potent crit damage bonus buff for 1 turn and bumps their action forward by 50%. The crit damage bonus is a flat amount plus a percentage of her crit damage. It's kinda like half of Bronya's ult and half of Bronya's skill in one ability. It gives your ally that turn push, but it's not instant, and gives crit damage, but just for that ally. With her Ascension 4 Trace node activated, the crit damage boost extends past the end of the 1 turn into the beginning of the 2nd turn, giving a small window in between for something like an ult activation to take advantage of. At level 6, her skill grants 18% of her own crit damage plus 36% flat. So if she has 200% crit damage, she'll give 36 plus 36 or 72% crit damage. Using this ability on herself grants her the buffs but does not push her turn forward. When she has a full bar of energy, which is 110, she can cast her ultimate, which grants 4 skill points for the whole team and also activates a buff for each ally called Cypher. This buff instantly boosts her talent's damage bonus buff by an additive amount. The wording in the tooltip is a little awkward, but after testing, once you activate her ultimate, the buff instantly applies to all current stacks. At level 6, this effect is 8% per stack, so instead of 4.5% from her talent, it's 12.5%. So the total at 3 stacks changes from 13.5 to 37.5%. Cypher itself is this purple mask buff, and as long as it's active, her talent's damage boost is improved. And last but not least, when nothing is happening, Sparkle can still use her basic attack. By default, it's a standard quantum attack, and with her A2 trace, it grants 10 additional base energy from 20 to 30. This equalizes it with a generic skill energy regeneration, meaning both abilities for her always regenerate base 30. This means you can feel less bad about using her basic attack when you don't need to buff, and it won't hurt her energy cycling because it costs the same instead of less. With 110 energy ultimate cost, she'll need an ERR rope and 3 casts of her skill or basic attack to min 3 cycle. This includes the 5 energy refunded from her ultimate. This totals to 95 base energy with 119.4% ERR for 113 energy generation. Adding 5% from a 2-piece planner ornament set does not really change the min 3 cycle, but does open good RNG possibilities of a 2-cycle ultimate. For talent priority, max out everything and ignore the basic attack. With the way her scalings go, I would prioritize her talent and skill first. Her talent is literally always active, so it's free team damage, and her skill's crit damage scaling is pretty solid. It's about 5 to 7% per level, depending on your Sparkle's crit damage. The ultimate always grants 4 skill points no matter the level, and the scaling just improves the boost to her talent damage bonus, which is only active when Cypher is active. The basic attack is unneeded, it's just for energy. From her trace stat nodes, she gains crit damage, effect resistance, and HP percent. I would recommend prioritizing all sources of crit damage. Prioritize effect resistance if running Broken Keel 2-piece ornament set to reach the passive threshold. The HP is optional, but nice to have to stay alive. I would say the only really optional node is the top right HP node because it requires level 80 and it also is resource expensive and it doesn't benefit her buffs. Eidolons. Let me preface this section that no Eidolons are necessary for Sparkle. Her kit is complete and feels amazing to use at E0. Now, that being said, I cannot lie when I say that these Eidolons are pretty nice. E1. Cypher lasts for 3 turns now, instead of 2, effectively making it 100% uptime, which means her passive talent damage boost is also improved. And plus 40% attack basically permanently. E2. Talent buff now also ignores defense. 3 stacks means 24% ignore defense for everyone. E3 and E5 are your standard level increases. E4. Skill point cap is now 8. Ultimate now grants 5 skill points. And E6. Crit damage boost is improved by 30% more of Sparkle's crit damage. So 200 crit damage Sparkle means 60% more crit damage for the buff. And that buff is now for everyone with Cypher on instead of just the target ally from her skill. So basically team AoE crit damage. Yeah, so overall, Sparkle's Eidolons are pretty nice. Of course, most of them have the caveat of having Cypher or her ultimate buff on for 100% uptime, which is pretty easy to do considering its 3-turn guarantee. Everything also gets improved, everyone also deals more damage, and there's more skill points. But they're not necessary, okay? Okay. Light cones. So the only buff from her kit that actually scales with any of her stats is crit damage. And the only light cone for Harmony that guarantees crit damage is unsurprisingly her signature. Carve the Moon from the Battle Pass does have crit damage, but it's RNG. Her signature is pretty juiced. Increases Sparkle's own crit damage, provides a buff called Mask, granting all team allies crit rate and crit damage, and this buff has 100% uptime with Sparkle's ult cycling, making it picture perfect. If you aren't willing to pull for it, which honestly I don't blame you, there are still a couple options that are pretty solid. There's Bronya's signature, which is also buyable with Starlight and grants 10% ERR, and after the wearer uses their skill, grants 30% damage boost to the next ally. Unfortunately, because Sparkle's skill is only 50% advanced forward, this Lycone's benefits aren't perfect. The energy is also nice, but unnecessary, because Sparkle herself is already minimum 3 cycle ultimate, and more ERR just puts you in this middle ground between 2 and 3 turn. That being said, the stats and buffs are still really nice to have. For 4-star Lycones, we have a decent selection of choices. Most of them do work under certain conditions. For generic use, Dance 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 is a default choice for the advanced forward, can't ever go wrong with it. For Mono Quantum, Planetary Rendezvous is excellent for same type damage bonus. Carve the Moon has 3 RNG buffs that are all useful, so it's fine, but it's from the Battle Pass. Past and Future is a weaker version of Bronya's signature. Dreamville Adventure, which is the new Lycone from the Forgotten Hall shop, is pretty decent for damage boost. So, even though her 5-star signature is so good for her, most of the 4-star Lycones have synergistic stats that work for various conditions, so don't feel pressured to pull. Relics and Planner Ornaments. So there's 2 possible options for 4-piece relic sets. Maximum crit damage Sparkle can run 4-piece Ice set for 25% crit damage after ulting. Sparkle averages 67% uptime with this 4-piece Ice, which is pretty good. For general use, we also have 4-piece Messenger for maximized speed, which is very solid. The difference between these 2 sets is really down to preference. 25% crit damage for Sparkle roughly translates to about 5% crit damage to the ally you're boosting, and Messenger gives 6 speed to Sparkle, because she has base 101 speed, and 12% to the team once every 3 turns on average. 5% is 5% crit damage. This can be viewed as pretty insignificant, but it's also technically free if the speed bonus for Messenger is not noticeable long term. If you don't have either of these 4-piece sets, there isn't really much besides a 2-piece Messenger for 6% speed, so it's that and then 2-piece Flex for highest crit damage substat. For Planner Ornaments, Broken Keel for max crit damage, 30% effect resistance is a requirement, and her traces also give you 10% for free, so you just need 20% from substats. Penacony is an option for 10% damage for quantum allies and 5% extra ERR. And then we also have the old school option of Xlice 2-piece for 8% attack if you don't have the other 2 sets. Main stats, pretty straightforward design with orb flexibility. So crit damage body piece for her buff scaling, speed boots because speed is king, ER rope to guarantee a 3-turn ult. The orb main stat doesn't really matter. She doesn't scale from any of the possible stats, so prioritize highest crit damage and speed substats for her kit. If you have multiple options, HP, defense main stat are good for tankiness, quantum attack are fine for damage. Recommended stat ranges for a full build. So, to start, let's narrow down the stats you care about for Sparkle. Speed, crit damage, energy regeneration rate, and then optionally effect resistance. At E0 and S1 signature light cone, with all relevant trace nodes unlocked, this is roughly what you can expect. So speed is variable, probably expect you to have 134 minimum and upwards of 160 plus with Ruan Mei. Crit damage, if you have her signature light cone, which gives 32% minimum crit damage, you're looking at the 250 to 300% crit damage range, accounting for substats. Without her signature light cone, you're probably in the 200 to 250% range. Energy regeneration rate, 119.4 minimum from the rope. Any lower and you can't guarantee 3-turn ult. And then effect resistance, optional for broken keel, 30% requirement. Everything else is basically extra. Probably want her to survive, so it's nice to have some tankiness. If you don't care, you can also look for crit rate and attack percent substats because her crit damage is naturally going to be super high. Keep in mind that her skill and her ultimate don't deal any damage to the enemies though, so it's really just her basic attack. Team synergies. So as a Harmony character that gives access to damage bonus, crit damage buffs, and skill point manipulation, Sparkle is pretty universal when it comes to her pairings. The only team composition that lacks immediate synergy with her are damage over time teams, and that's due to damage over time lacking crit synergy. But that's okay, because DOT teams have many strong options now and are totally fine without Sparkle. Now of course, there are some exceptional synergies with Sparkle, but I first want to reassure that if you're a newer player to honkaistarrail, then she can basically be used to buff anyone that scales with crit stats. So, if you've recently got your hands on the free Dr. Ratio, Sparkle would be a great support to help him further boost his damaging needs. And I think it's important to mention that you don't need to tunnel on her Nocturne A6 Trace passive, which focuses only on attack percent scaling teams. Her main buffs are damage bonus and crit damage, and even defense or HP scaling units that deal DPS can take advantage of that. We have units like Argenti, Jing Yuan, Yanqing, Topaz Numi, Jing Liu, Bald, and any other 4-star crit scaling DPS you can think of. Now I didn't mention certain characters because they deserve a special section for themselves. Xlice or Qingque, and Danheng and Baiba de Lune. First up is the Mono Quantum. So with Sparkle's release, Mono Quantum is basically complete. Xlice's strength as a Quantum Hunt character revolves around her Resurgence talent to gain a free turn upon killing an enemy. With the right setup, you guys know fully well how easily Xlice can feedback loop this and gain an insane amount of turns in a row. The only problem, she's usually trying to spam her skill because it does the largest amount of damage without ulting. Now with Sparkle, Xlice's weakness of being incredibly skill point hungry is managed with Sparkle's ult, while also gaining attack percent buffs from Nocturne, damage bonus from skill point usage, and crit damage from Sparkle's skill. Combine this pairing with Silverwolf and Fu Xuan, and you've got the perfect quantum lineup with survivability from Fu Xuan and forced quantum weakness with Silverwolf alongside def reduction debuffs. You'll also gain max value from Sparkle's Nocturne Trace with 30% attack for quantum allies on top of the base 15% or 45% total. Similar to Xlice's Relentless Reset Assault, Qingque's desire to consume skill points for the perfect tiles also fits this exact same situation. Now for the imaginary side with Danheng and Baiba de Lune, or Dill. So Dill is known as the hypercarry of hypercarries in StarRail. He can massively enhance his own basic attack to rip through the enemies, but at the cost of consuming multiple skill points per turn if he doesn't have his own Sacrosanctus stacks. So usually Dill teams would take a bit of time to set up so that Dill has enough skill points to make a Giga enhanced basic attack while still being buffed by his team. With Sparkle, Dill mains can be much more aggressive with their skill points and front load a bunch of damage with both of their ults active. In this way, Dill can chain multiple max enhanced basic attacks in a row to wipe the enemies away. Combine this pairing with Luocha and E6 Yukong or Hanya for a near mono imaginary team that generates a huge amount of skill points for Dill to wreak havoc with. To optimize the turn order for this composition and ensure that Yukong's buff lands when it's Dill's turn, Yukong needs to act right before Sparkle acts. In this way, Yukong can first activate her skill, which lasts for the next 2 actions on your team, then Sparkle takes 1 necessary turn from Yukong's buff to boost Dill up and grant him crit damage bonus, and then Dill can finally act with both buffs active simultaneously. In both of these exceptional synergy teams, Sealy and Dill can remain at base speed and focus entirely on raw damage stats. Sparkle will be the one to push them, and because she only boosts by 50%, Sparkle does not need to be speed tuned perfectly because the turn order will change almost instantly. This means that Sparkle can operate as fast as she wants, and even if she laps your DPS, she can just basic attack to still gain the same amount of energy courtesy of her A2 trace to not ruin her 3-turn ultimate cycle. And that should be a pretty encompassing guide for Sparkle. Overall, I think she's an exceptionally valuable Harmony unit for both new players and veterans alike. Only if you are a die-hard damage over time fan and don't build anyone else will there be lower value for her. But I think even then, her skill point generation is super juicy and makes the game much more enjoyable. Thank you guys for watching, and don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, it really helps a lot. Good luck yourselves on pulling for Sparkle, and as always, we'll see you next time. Take care.